had to do a little bit of research because the internet is calling this Silent Hill remake. And I'm like, but why though? Because I watched the trailer, it looks good. For those of you who don't know, and believe it or not, there's an entire generation which probably doesn't. Silent Hill is a very ancient game. It defined the survival horror genre. It has a huge fan base. And unfortunately, for a while, we haven't seen any more entries into it. And it's a shame because the game was really great. It had some beautiful nurses. It had some really great atmosphere. I mean, the thing that was scary about the game wasn't just the monsters, but the atmosphere and the environment. And it was one of those games that you would go to school and you would talk with your colleagues about, and you would try to find a way to pass the levels. It had some really difficult puzzles. Silent Hill 2 is considered to be one of the best in the series, which is why I guess they tried to do a remake of it. And when I watched the trailer, the remake looked really great. It reminded me of the Resident Evil 2 remake, which I consider to be one of the games of the year. So, why are people upset about it, right? Well, apparently there was an interview, which the developer Bloober team has announced small hints about what we can expect from that remake. And the chief marketing officer, Anna Jasinka, had a couple of things to say. She said that we're developing a Silent Hill game, which is an honor and a dream come true. So, like, that's a good thing, right? Like, they're treating the IP with respect. She said that the game is going to have new graphics and new gameplay, which honestly is a good thing. I didn't think like that before, but after I played Resident Evil 2 Remake, I do agree that you can update the graphics and you can change the gameplay a little bit here and there and make the game even better. She then says that we're not trying to move away from the original. They're not trying to stray from the original concept of making this cult classic. Longtime fans shouldn't worry about us missing the point. So I'm reading this interview and I'm like, oh my god, like she's saying the correct things. Like, this is what I want from the game. But then she says, so far, changes have been made for the contemporary audience. And this is the problem, right? Like, I can't think of a single remake. Can you? Like, can you think of a single remake that has one of these dog whistles for the modern audience, for the contemporary audience, for modern times? Can you think of a single game that has that in, and it actually ended up being good? For current year. On current political issues. I can't think of any, so this is why people are concerned. I believe that maybe, you know, she's trying to please the journalists and the public at the same time, or maybe it really is for the contemporary audience. I don't know. I guess, like, we're not going to see those sexy nurses making a return. That's a shame. But what I do think is actually happening is that many people notice that horror games, if they're too scary, they don't sell. And unfortunately, this is what I heard from the Resident Evil team. Resident Evil 7, despite the fact that it got some really good reviews and almost everyone that played it liked it, it was too scary. According to the developers, right? Like, I didn't find it too scary. Unless you played it with VR, then it was scary as hell. But if you played Resident Evil 7, apparently the developers think that it was too scary, and they had to tone it down in Resident Evil 8. This is why Resident Evil 8 doesn't have that many stealth scenes, doesn't have that many scary moments. It's a lot more action-packed. And unfortunately, I noticed the same problem with the Resident Evil franchise as a whole. Like, when it came out, it was a scary game. But, you know, Resident Evil 1, incredibly frightening for its time. Resident Evil 2, also very scary. But as you're going all the way from 3 to 4, you notice that it becomes more and more action-packed. And the fear takes a back seat. But the thing is, as the sequels progress and we move all the way to Resident Evil 6, it becomes just an action game. And this is where people start dropping the franchise. They don't buy it anymore. And then they reinvent themselves with Resident Evil 7. And then at 8, they go back to the action pack. And I'm curious how Resident Evil 9 is going to be like. But this is the same thing with Silent Hill now, right? Like, they are pointing out, okay, well, horror isn't for everyone. So we need to tone down the horror. And I don't know if they can do it, honestly, because you have the people who like horror. I mean, that's the core franchise. That's the main type of demographic that want to buy this game. It's people who want horror survival. But if you tone it down, I don't know if you can attract the people who want action, because they're more into Call of Duty, they're more into other types of games. I mean, if there is a person who doesn't like horror, they're not going to try Silent Hill, no matter how much you make it an action-packed thing, no matter how much you try to tone down the horror thing. Like, for example, my wife, right? Like, my wife doesn't really like things that are scary. So like, she's not going to pick it up. No matter, like, okay, well, let's de-sexify the nurses. No, like, she just doesn't like things that are scary. She doesn't like violence. You'll never attract that type of audience to this type of game, no matter how many changes you make. The problem is, like, when you're making changes, the only thing you're accomplishing is alienating the core audience. And this is what happened with Dead Space as well. Like, Dead Space, one of the best horror games that came out within the last decade, I would say. The first one was really good. The second one was also good. But then by the third one, they're like, okay, well, let's make it more action-packy, and let's add multiplayer to it. The game wasn't good at all. I mean, you can't have a horror experience in multiplayer. I just don't think it's possible. Maybe someone, sometime, is going to prove me wrong by making a multiplayer horror game, but I just don't think you can do it. So they ruined it, right? Like, the last Dead Space game, Dead Space 3, was the last entry in the franchise because of these decisions. Like, let's appeal to the wider market. Let's actually make it more enjoyable for people who do not like horror. Let's try to bring the Destiny and the Call of Duty people in. You're not going to manage to do it. And the main problem is the ideologues that are making these decisions. They think it's like math. They think it's like, okay, well, the core audience is going to like our game no matter what. So if we make these changes, it's just going to attract the wider market. And this is why people like Arch Warhammer are calling it the fictional market, right? The unicorn market. Because it doesn't fucking exist. Like, the reason people do not play a scary game is because they do not like to be scared. It's simple, right? So, like, if you make the game less scary, you're not attracting more people. Like, you know, I don't know anyone that's like, oh, I want to watch a horror movie, but I just want it to be less scary. But I want it to be a horror movie, right? Like, no, people don't think like that. Either they like the genre, or they don't. There's no in between. I haven't seen anyone that's like, oh yes, horror movies are horrible, but like, I'll watch this one because it's not that scary. Let me know what you think, and yeah, hopefully this is just a marketing thing. This is just something that she says in order to, I don't know, appeal to investors, appeal to the journalists, but in reality, they're going to keep Silent Hill the same way it is, and it should be a very scary game. Like, when you see the triangle head coming in, you should piss your pants. That's what the game was about. And hopefully they will maintain that. They can change a little bit of the story as well, because I already know what's happening. So if they change something, I want to change something in the ending, right? Like, that would be cool. To give a little bit of a, I guess, like a new thing to experience for the people who already have played Silent Hill 2 and know the ending. But yeah, we'll see. Let me know what you guys think, though. And as usual, I will see you in the comments section. Take care.